It was a cold evening in the city, the kind where neon lights reflected off wet sidewalks and people hurried by with their coats pulled tightly around them. The sound of car horns and chatter filled the air, but for a young girl sitting against a brick wall near a coffee shop, the world seemed painfully quiet. Her hair was messy, her hands trembled in the chill, and her eyes carried the heavy story of someone who had seen too much for her age. She looked no older than 20. In front of her lay a cardboard sign, "Hungry. Anything helps." Most people walked past her without even looking. Some averted their gaze, pretending she didn't exist. A few shook their heads as if her presence was an inconvenience in their otherwise busy lives. Yet, she sat there, shivering, clutching a small backpack, the only thing she owned that tied her to her past. Across the street, a man stood silently, watching her. He wasn't dressed like everyone else rushing by. His suit was sharp, his shoes polished, and his presence commanded respect. His name was Daniel Carter, a billionaire CEO whose face appeared often in magazines and financial news. But tonight, he wasn't here for business. Something in the girl's face had caught his attention. It wasn't just her poverty, it was the quiet dignity with which she endured it. Daniel had always believed people revealed their true character when given an opportunity. And as he stepped closer to her, he decided he was going to test something most would consider absurd. "Hey," he said softly. The girl looked up, startled. Her eyes widened as if she expected him to scold her for sitting there. But his tone was gentle, almost kind. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She nodded hesitantly, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes, but I'll be okay." Her answer wasn't what he expected. Most in her situation would have begged immediately, but she seemed almost reluctant to admit her need. That intrigued him even more. He reached into his coat and pulled out something unusual. It was sleek, black, and carried no visible limits. A credit card that most would never hold in their lifetime. "I want you to take this," Daniel said, holding it out. The girl blinked, confused. "What is that?" "It's a card," he said. "With no limit. You can use it to buy whatever you need. Food, clothes, even a roof over your head tonight." Her jaw dropped. She stared at the card as though it were unreal. "Is this some kind of joke?" Daniel shook his head. "No joke, but I'll be watching. What you do with it will tell me everything I need to know." She hesitated, her hands trembling as she reached out and accepted the card. Part of her wanted to run, to escape with this miracle in her hands. But something in his eyes told her there was more to this than just a gift. Her name was Emily. Once upon a time, she had dreams, college, a family, a future. But life had dealt her cruel blows, her mother's death, her father's abandonment, and a spiral of circumstances that left her on the streets. Still, she had never stolen, never lied, never taken more than she needed. With the card in hand, she stood slowly, her legs weak. Daniel followed from a distance, curious about what she would do. Her first stop was the convenience store on the corner. The clerk raised an eyebrow as she approached the counter with nothing but a bottle of water and a loaf of bread. She hesitated before swiping the card, as though she feared it would scream, fraud, and expose her. But the transaction went through smoothly. She clutched the bag tightly, almost embarrassed by her modesty. Daniel watched silently from the door. She could have bought anything, wine, cigarettes, or an entire basket of food, but she chose the simplest necessities. From there, Emily walked past a clothing store. For a moment, she paused, staring at the warm coats displayed in the window. Her jacket was thin, hardly enough for the night's cold. Daniel wondered if she would go inside. But after a long sigh, she shook her head and kept walking. Her next stop surprised him. She entered a small diner, ordered one plate of hot soup and bread, and sat in the corner, savoring every bite. She didn't eat like someone desperate. She ate slowly, respectfully, as though the food was too precious to waste. Daniel sat at a table across the room, hidden behind a newspaper. He watched her closely, and then his heart tightened as he noticed what she did next. A homeless man entered the diner, looking tired and ragged. The waitress shook her head when he asked for coffee, clearly telling him he had no money. Emily's eyes softened. Without a second thought, she stood, walked over, and invited him to sit at her table. "Order something," she said, sliding the card across to the waitress. The man looked shocked. Are you sure?" Emily smiled faintly. "Everyone deserves to eat." Daniel felt something stir deep inside him. Here she was, given unlimited power to buy anything for herself, yet the first thing she did was share with another who had nothing. The night went on, and Emily continued walking. She bought a few more simple things: a pack of socks, a toothbrush, and a small blanket. Each purchase was thoughtful, never excessive. But then came the moment Daniel had been waiting for. She stopped in front of a luxury boutique. The mannequins wore designer dresses that cost thousands of dollars. The temptation was right there, within her reach. She stepped inside. Daniel's pulse quickened. Would she give in? Would she betray the quiet dignity she'd shown all evening? Emily walked slowly past the racks, her fingers brushing the fabric. She paused in front of a shimmering dress, her reflection glowing in the mirror. For the first time, she looked like the young woman she once dreamed of being, a woman with a future, with hope. But then she shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. She turned, walked to the children's section, and picked up a small coat. Not for herself, but for a little girl she had seen earlier huddled with her mother under a bridge. When she left the store, Daniel couldn't hold back anymore. He approached her. "Why didn't you buy something for yourself?" he asked softly. Emily froze, startled to see him again. She lowered her gaze. "Because, I don't need much. Not compared to others. That little girl, she doesn't have a coat. She'll be colder than I ever will. If I can help her, even just a little, that means more than a fancy dress." Her voice cracked. "Besides, clothes don't change who I am inside." Daniel stood in silence, his throat tight. In his world of wealth and excess, people constantly fought for more cars, more houses, more status. Yet here was a girl with nothing, choosing to give away what she had been offered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another envelope. "Emily," he said, using her name for the first time. "You've passed a test most would fail." She looked confused. "Test?" He nodded. "I gave you that card not to see if you'd spend, but to see who you really are. And tonight, you showed me more humanity than I've seen in years." Inside the envelope was a letter of employment, offering her a job at his company, along with an apartment key. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she opened it. I don't understand." "Why me?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Because the world needs more people like you. People who think of others before themselves. Money can buy many things, Emily, but it can't buy a heart like yours. And I'd rather have someone with your heart working by my side than the smartest graduate from any Ivy League school." Emily broke down, covering her face with her hands. For the first time in years, she felt hope, not just for survival, but for a future. Weeks later, she walked into Daniel's office, not as a homeless girl, but as his new assistant. She wore clean clothes, her hair neatly tied back, and her smile radiant. The little girl she had bought the coat for had visited her, hugged her tightly, and whispered, "Thank you." And in that moment, Emily knew she had done the right thing. Daniel watched her with pride. He had given her a black card to test her humanity, but in truth, she had given him something far greater: faith. Faith that kindness still existed in a world obsessed with wealth. The story of Emily spread quietly among the employees, inspiring them more than any motivational seminar ever could. She became living proof that character, not circumstances, defined who you were. And every time Daniel looked at her, he remembered the lesson she had unknowingly taught him, that the true measure of wealth isn't in how much you have, but in how much you give. Because in the end, it wasn't the millionaire who saved the homeless girl. It was the homeless girl who reminded the millionaire what it meant to be human.